Well, good morning and welcome to today's Crop Hour featuring the Every Acre Counts program and profitability. My name is Connie Strunk and I'm a plant pathology field specialist with SDSU Extension, and I will be your host/moderator today. If you have any questions throughout today's program, please feel free to utilize the chat feature, type them in there, or the question and answer QA towards the bottom of the screen. Either one, we will address your questions, comments as they come in throughout today's presentation. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to my colleague, Anthony Bly. He has been with SDSU Extension since 2013, but he's no stranger to SDSU, as previously he has worked at the soil testing lab and has had various roles within SDSU. His co-host or co-presenter today is Kristen Weber. She is with Pheasants Forever. Prior to her position with joining Pheasants Forever, she had worked as a precision ag specialist, performing farm analysis for South Dakota producers on a variety of precision ag tech platforms. She also has had quite an extensive experience working as a licensed crop insurance agent. So she's got a deep knowledge of farm programs, which makes her a great presenter and person for this job. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to both Anthony and Kristen.
Okay, thank you, Connie. Appreciate that. What Kristen and I are going to do is we have a split presentation today, and I'll kick it off with a few slides first, and then Kristen will take over in the middle, and then I'll finish it up at the end. So that's kind of what you should expect. So can everybody see the first slide of the Every Acre Counts presentation? Is it there, Connie?
Yes, that looks good.
Good,
Yep.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, so Every Acre Counts. You know, what a great program. It developed as a result of a lot of folks working together with one common vision. For helping farmers increase their productivity and profitability on their farms. And one way, the main focus of the program is to address our marginal lands. And so the epitome of the program's lead off picture is really showing all of that and what we'd like to see on our South Dakota lands. And so here we have a picture of a soybean field. That could be a corn field, that could be a wheat field or some other crop next to a wetland area. We don't know if this wetland area had salt issues, but more than likely it probably did at some point. And so we see that marginal land successfully converted to a forage-based plant species and an appropriate species for this situation. So let's get started. I did mention this, a program that came about from the working and visions of many different people. I won't individualize those people today, but a lot of people take a lot of credit or deserve a lot of credit for this. But there's three primary partners. The Second Century Habitat Fund is a fund that was created by Governor Dugard and now is continued with Governor Noem. It's a fund to just promote habitat on our landscapes in South Dakota. Basically a way to describe that. Of course, the USDA, NRCS, is also a major partner, helping to provide some of the funding to get this program going and off the ground, and for implementation of some of the practices that we're going to talk about. And then SDSU Extension's role is to just run the program, oversee the program, and build the program over time. So Matt Dearson and I are the co-directors for the program. Dr. Dearson is a professor in the risk and business management section at SDSU. He oversees the program as far as the financial analysis, and will be instrumental in writing summaries and case study work for the program as it gains traction and builds a data set later in the later years. We're very excited. Connie introduced Kristen, but I want to introduce her again. We're very excited to have Kristen on the team. Brings as Connie summarized, a huge amount of knowledge about precision ag and insurance and cropping systems in South Dakota. And so she's employed by Pheasants Forever, but it is a cooperative project with SDSU. And we have several other partners as well that I will mention later. So, what are the project goals and outcomes that we're looking for? We really want to improve profitability on the farm through addressing diversity and ecosystem benefits of agriculture and using precision ag to do that. In the past, those two areas didn't seem, really, friendly, if you will, or well suited for each other. But some very intelligent and forward-thinking people have come to realize that our precision ag technologies are very powerful in taking a look at that incremental or foot by foot or 10 by 10 foot area of a field and looking at it in a very precise way. And so we just want to combine, those tools that we have in the precision ag and empower producers with information. And knowledge is power, and especially about your own operation. So we want to do that. And some of our outcomes that we would expect is that this information available to producers would result in net returns on their investments on their farm, and enhancing the land management of farms and the land that they control would increase its sustainability as far as improving water and other natural resources, and soil health is a big part of that improvement. So precision profitability analysis is what we use to identify the marginal field areas, and removing marginal croplands from crop production practices is showing to increase profitability. We know that, and there's a number of social barriers that we are confronted with every day, but we are working through those, and it takes time to change a land management paradigm, because that's actually what we're trying to invoke, is how people think about the landscape and the highest and best use of soils. So what are marginal lands? Well, we've got three different categories of marginal lands that we like to talk about, and I guess I've let it off here with the most significant class of marginal land I think that we've been confronted with in the last decade or more. It's these alkali spots, as it's most commonly referred to. So soil types in fields that have naturally occurring salts close to the soil surface, and because of certain things, practices included, but climate is a big factor as well. These salts have come to the surface. They've found their way to the soil surface, and these soils are very unproductive because of that. And I'm sure if you're a producer attending the webinar today and you have salty soils, you know that nothing grows there. And so that's our first type of marginal land. Just another picture I want to show you. These lands, extend through the east central part of our state. There are a number of salty areas in the west as well. But the Jim River Valley is the area most prone to these salty issues because of its parent material, its glacial age, and the number of salts in our geology. Salts aren't a bad thing. They bring alkalinity, they balance acidity, but too much of them in the wrong place obviously doesn't work. And so that's a marginal land, and there's many things we can do to address that. Just wanted to add this picture this morning, actually. A salty area that's actually blowing in the wind. You can see that those salts, that dust in the air is white, and those are salts that have dried out and are blowing across there. So something we want to heal up, we want to fix, if you will. I don't really like that word, but it's probably appropriate for these marginal lands. And I added this picture as well. It shows an example of fixing it. We know the plant species that are able to grow in these salty areas. They have a higher tolerance for salt. And so planting these areas or the immediate area around them as well to these salt tolerant plant species really helps these areas become more productive and use the water that's in the landscape in that area, and makes the soils around them more productive as well. So it's a good thing to address these salty issues with the most appropriate plant species. Of course, our eroded hillsides are another type of marginal land. They are becoming more prevalent in the areas that have sloping lands, and you can see this landscape actually from Minnehaha County around Sioux Falls area. You can see these hillsides are lighter in color, and they are eroded. The once higher organic matter soils that were dark in color are being removed by erosion processes, and so those lands are losing productivity, and some of them have become unprofitable as well, and so those are considered a marginal land. These eroded hillsides lead to other problems. This is a waterway that the producer is trying to farm, and in the right year, in most years with the higher rainfall events that we're having, these gullies are forming. And so another example of a marginal land that could be addressed by the appropriate farming method. And so waterway is what we would use to address this issue. Of course, our wetlands are marginal as well. And we all know 2019, we came through, and the beginning of 2020, higher rainfall and wet areas. And we also all know the common practice, or what most people think about is how to fix these is put a pipe in there and get rid of that excess water. But quite frankly, some of these areas just aren't able to be, tile drained. The outlet is poor. There's nowhere to go with the water. They're considered a wetland, and so it's illegal to drain them. And so, trying to farm them on an annual basis and get that crop established in there in the long run is kind of futile. It just is a practice that we should probably just to give up in most cases. Now, the social argument is in those dry years, those are the most productive soils on the farm. And without salts in the non-salty areas, that would be a true statement. Absolutely. But I think if you look at the long haul, the number of wet years are probably going to take that profitability out of those really good years that you have when it's dry. And so there's a balance there that we need to really investigate, and not every marginal land area is created equal. And so we trust the farmer, the landowner, the history that they know on these pieces of ground. We trust them to have the first really set of evidences that these lands, really shouldn't be used as croplands. Just wanted to show another extreme case of a wetland. Of course, this is pretty expansive, and this is occurring, on a regular basis. We have to question whether cropland use on some of these types of lands is really appropriate. So that's the Every Acre Counts is addressing those marginal lands. And we have a very, I think, a really robust, good way to do that. We need to work with producers, of course, our landowners, and we want them to have precision crop records. We have been able to work with some imagery on a few farms, and we're willing to do that. But we really want at least 3 years of yield monitor data and crop input data to make our analysis more robust. 5 or even 10 years would be a lot better, and some of those farms are they have that amount of data. But we know as farmers trade combines and have problems and issues with the equipment and the hardware, there may be some issues with some of that data during some of those years. So Kristen is going to talk about the precision analysis part, but we use precision software to do that analysis for us and ultimately identify marginal lands. After we've done that, we provide a really nice report to the producer and a list of forage-based plant species that are most suited to their marginal land, and that's what we recommend seeding there. We also assess profitability in marginal lands after it's been converted. We really want to see the impact on the whole farm and the profitability of the whole farm. We help the producer determine if there's a program that we can use to financially support the conversion of these marginal lands, and we have monies available for that. And so we haven't run out yet, but there are some programs that we can use for that. Of course, we want to share this success with other producers as well. We are on the quest to change a land management paradigm. And what is a paradigm? That's a new word for you. I get it, but that's like a norm, or how society would normally treat a situation. And currently, in most parts of our state, the land management paradigm is if you have land, you have to get something from it. And we understand that. But there are different ways to get something from it. And quite frankly, some of our soils these marginal soils are most productive when they're put in a forage-based type of management. And so I think we have to come to grips with that and realize that. So farm the best, leave the rest, or farm the best and do something different with the rest. And so that's what we want to change. We want to come in and monitor the effects of this conversion on soil health, and possibly do some water quality work as well. And then ultimately in the end, develop case studies summarizing the impacts of these conversions on farm profitability. Lastly, there's a huge, sometimes I struggle to find the right word, but it is a barrier. That's kind of a negative connotation, but how we what we currently do, there's some huge factors that really guide the way we do things. And so policymakers are at the root or the core of that change that needs to be implemented. And so possibly our work over a number of years, obtaining data and evaluating the impacts on farms will get to these policymakers, and they will be able to better make policy changes. And so that's our ultimate goal in the end. So increased on-farm profitability is leading the way as our major objective. Insurance, crop insurance is related to that. I'm going to show an example later about the effect on the average yield and how that may affect APH yield levels and insurability. And then when there's a claim does occur, it should have a positive effect on the economics as well. We think about soil health and carbon. I'll talk about that later. Improving water quality and increasing wild habitat is really important as well. It's vitally important, really. Governor Noem has addressed that with several programs that she's developed while she's been governor, getting kids outside and enjoying our natural resources is really important. And so wildlife fit into that, vitally, are very important. We have an opportunity to educate students as well on campus, and those are kind of emerging things with some of the coursework. Every Acre Counts is promoting a working lands concept, not a rigid government program where you have all these rules and things that you need to follow. There's just a few rules we'll talk about with Every Acre Counts. Eventually, we'll see a decreased reliance on farm program funding for the subsidies and the insurance as well. And then lastly, just as I spoke yesterday to large animal feeding operations, there's a lot more of them than there is of us. And I make that statement broadly, but those of us working in agriculture, there's a lot less of us than there was 10 and 20 and 30 and 50 years ago. And so the eyes are upon us, and they see what agriculture does, and addressing marginal lands in a positive, profitable way will get other stakeholders' attention. And so we're producing the food for them, and they have to drink water, and they want clean water. And so anything that agriculture can do to increase stakeholder confidence is a win. So Every Acre Counts is a statewide program. It originally started in 15 counties, but last July it was opened up to all of South Dakota, and we're extremely happy about that. So some of the details of the core Every Acre Counts program, after we've done the analysis, after Kristen has done the analysis, after we've provided the precision profitability report, and if the producer would like to, set aside or use an alternative practice for these marginal lands, it's a 5-year commitment. There's a $150 incentive payment. Pheasants Forever and SDSU, uses their precision data to identify these marginal lands. The producer decides how much rolled on land. And I say kind of strongly that, beginning to work with us and doing the precision profitability, there's no obligation to put land in any program. We want the chance to provide that precision profitability analysis to the producer first, and then they can decide what they want to do. So there's money for seeding these appropriate, forage species out there. It's not an easement program at all. Again, I want to focus on the working lands concept. You know, we allow grazing all year long, so these areas don't need to be fenced. The forage can be harvested, but we have to be outside of the primary nesting season. And hunting is not regulated. It's controlled by the producer and the landowner. So there's no obligation for, you know, in return for the precision profitability analysis. We just want the chance to do that, empower producers with knowledge about their own farm. So with that, Kristen will take over and show you what she does. It's really impressive.
Did my request control go through?
Yes.
So, okay, perfect. So our vision with the precision program with Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever is to demonstrate through the use of technology in collaboration, farmers will increase their profitability while also providing benefits for soil health, water quality, and wildlife habitat. So my job is to assist these farming operations in utilizing their data in a different way. I don't think it's moving, Anthony. Oh, there it goes. Okay, so my process is 5 steps typically. The first is to understand the operation goals, then connect to the data, analyze the operation, identify options, and then plan and implement. So the first step of understanding the operation is really just about getting to know you. What have you done in the past for conservation? What have you liked? What didn't you like, and what worked and what hasn't, and just create that line of communication between us. So the next step with connecting the data, we use the EFC Field Analytics software for the profit analysis. This provides us the opportunity to directly connect with your John Deere, Climate, or Winfield platforms, but we can also manually import data from a host of different machines. The second step with connecting the data is collecting the production cost information, the yield potentials for those fields, and the grain prices that you expect to deliver on. And we're also able to bring in the harvest or the fertilizer and planting application maps that you put down so that we can use these maps to fine tune the reports versus putting on a blanket cost across the field. And costs can also be broken down into specific nutrients in the fertilizer category, chemicals applications, and seeding varieties can also be product specific. So after the data is loaded, I take the harvest files and merge them into what's called a normalized yield map. And with this yield map, or this normalized yield map, that gives the percent of average of each zone within that field, and then in turn put that into the yield potential map that's used for the profit analysis. So looking at that chart over on the right-hand side, you can see a zone 8 is between 100% and 107%. So just to kind of understand that, if your field average was around 150 bushel, that zone 8 would be within that range. So the images here on the corn analysis show the profitability distribution. You can see that it ranges between $400 to losing $200 an acre. And by removing those marginal lands in the Northeast and the Southwest, we can remove those net negative 100 and 200 acre dollar values. Also with removing those 8 acres, he has the potential to increase his harvested production by about 11 bushel. The acreage opportunity ratio there shows the percent of land that is not producing a profit. So that went down by 9%. And the total profit on this analysis does not include any conservation payment added back in. And it also does not include any fixed cost expense, like if he had to still pay rent on those acres. So once we finalize all the analysis, I put together an Excel spreadsheet with a whole operation summary and put in these fixed cost expenses and a conservation payment that really gives a full picture on the total profit at the end. Here's the same field with a soybean analysis on it. So we typically try to do a couple different crops, and we can put the yields at higher or lower different potentials and look at future crop prices so that we can really pinpoint those marginal acres that even no matter what crop you're putting it into, it's still just not producing for your farm. And we just look at maybe how we can manage that differently, or just by removing it from the operation, what it would do for you. So here are the two comparisons of corn and soybeans with the original field versus the marginal acres removed. Typically coming out, like Anthony mentioned, we see a reduced expense, the increase in ROI, the increase in profit, and coming with the overall increase in yield, which would then in turn, over time, as your APH builds with those higher yields, have the opportunity to reduce your premium on those crop insurance policies. So at this point, we also bring in the Pheasants Forever Farm Bill biologist in the area to help with their expertise in the USDA programs that would potentially fit for these acres. We also look at the Every Acre Counts option and the Soil Health and Habitat program to put in there. So the Farm Bill biologists are a wealth of knowledge and everything that goes into a conservation plan and grass seedings. And they're always very happy to answer any questions that you would have. So here's a map of their locations throughout the state. Over on the right, there's their phone number and email and name. And also, if you go to the South Dakota Habitat Pays website that I have listed at the bottom, you can click on this county that you live in, and it'll give you an interactive list of different habitat advisors for your area. And it would give all that same information there as well. So there's my contact information. If anyone ever wants to reach out to me with any questions or how to get in contact with somebody else or need any fields analyzed, I would be glad to help you out with that. I'll turn it back over to you, Anthony.
Oh, there we go. I had an audio control covering my button. So thank you, Kristen. Appreciate that. She gave a great example of what she did and a real on-farm example. And I'm gonna go through a few more because I think it's important to show successes and what's happening. And so I first want to talk about a class project that Nick Ook, our precision instructor on campus, had a group of upper class students, and there was a combination of students from, I call it wildlife and fisheries, but it's now natural resources, and economics students, and agronomy students, and ag engineering, precision ag students. And so all working together for a common goal. And so they were given a quarter section of land here. I can tell you that's in Kingsbury County, right there, Highway 81 there on the map. This producer is very willing to share his successes and what he's doing on his farm. So the students analyzed that quarter section. You can see a huge wetland down kind of the middle there running at an angle, and that's not considered cropland, but the area around that wetland is got the issues. And so students took that project and they did the profitability analysis with multi-year data, and they located, just as Kristen showed you what she did there, these students were doing this in their class, and they identified about what do we got here? 7% of the field is unprofitable, according to the producer's records. And it's along that wetland, because that wetland grows and shrinks, and lately it's been growing a lot. So and then here in the corner down here, they also identified some areas that were unprofitable. So what they proposed to do is to kind of square up these edges, these field edges. And you can see here on the slide that these kind of green lines are what they propose to take out of production and to put in the perennial type grass species that are tolerant to wet feet. This isn't a salty area at all. This is just a wet area. And so that's what they proposed to do. And they did that, and they reassessed the profitability, and they increased or improved the loss here. Of course, they moved it up the scale, if you will. And so essentially they were adding these buffer strips. That's a buffer strip practice. So they reassessed that and looked at the economics. The average yield there improved from right under 180 bushels here, 179.9 up to 187.3. The profitability increased, return on investment increased. The one I like is the break even. That went down. And so because they're spending less on the expenses on the unprofitable areas, their break even went down, and quite dramatically in this case, from about 327 a bushel to 246. So that helps. And the total field profit went from a negative situation to a positive situation. So there's a good example of increasing that on-farm profitability. The next example I want to show you is also real farm analysis for several fields that we have in the program. Also want to tell you that we practice a high level of confidentiality, very high level. And Kristen and I and Dr. Dearson, really the only eyes that will ever see data that would connect a name or a farm name to a field. We really want to use the data for making our case studies and our summaries and education of other producers, but a farm name or an individual's name will never appear on any summary or any extension fact sheet or Pheasants Forever publication, or however that data is used. It's only for education, and we practice a high level of confidentiality. I'm spending a lot of time on that because I understand the importance. We understand the importance of that confidentiality. And so this example here is a number of fields that we've looked at, and each field was put into a profit or loss category, a percent of the field. Excuse me, I'm sorry. And so you can see in every one of these fields, the losses are shown in the red. You know, we're getting up to $250 of loss here in some parts of some of these fields. There's a lot of $50 losses and $100 losses, of course. But by and large, the losses range from a low of 3% to a high of 46%, believe it or not. And so, so that's information that's very powerful for a producer. And again, we just want the chance to provide this, have a discussion about alternative practices, but again, there's no obligation to go further into any type of program. Kristen showed all the biologists there willing and capable, very capable of you know, finding the right program. They live and breathe that stuff daily, and I'm glad, because then we don't have to. But they're passionate about what they do, and they're the advocate for the producer walking in the door of that farm service agency building. And so we need to tap into those biologists. But look at here, in these 11 fields, there's a total of almost $73,000. I don't know if leaving it on the table is the right term, but it's a loss. And And what could, if collectively, if these fields were all on one farm, what could that farm do with that extra money that they're spending on inputs? So anyway, some real life data there. I want to roll on to a different topic. We'll kind of end with this topic. It's something that's came about, not even towards the beginning of Every Acre Counts. It's something that's came about in the last few months. It's been around for a number of years. It kind of gained popularity 10, 15 years ago. It's the topic about carbon payments. I want to leave the discussion about climate out of it. It's kind of a hot button topic. It's kind of irrelevant to the fact that there are a number of entities trying to develop programs to pay producers to essentially sequester carbon in their soil. So that's the reality. Despite the reason, let's talk about the reality. So I've been working on. I'm a data person. I'm the research person, and I like data. And so I've been working with a number of farms. I've got 13 farms in my pool, and just over 6,000 soil samples over approximately a 15-year period. And again, you don't know where these farms are at, and I'm not going to tell you either. And you won't know these farmers' names. So again, that high level of confidentiality. But we have to find some way to convey the results of what we found from those 6,000 soil samples. And so what I've done is divided the analysis into soil issues, if you will. Soils that don't have any inherent baggage or big problems, so non-marginal soils that we consider non-marginal soils. And so I'm showing here based on productivity rating. You know that USDA has a soil productivity rating system for soils, and the state government uses that, for taxes and so forth. So I am looking at that based on that productivity rating. And I was able to calculate the carbon loss or gain on a number of these farms, fields, zones in these fields. And what I found out was the lower producing soils are losing carbon. Okay, so these would be they're marginally marginal, or almost marginal land is what I'm trying to say. But our good soils, our good producing soils, they're gaining carbon. There's no doubt. And so there's a possibility here for a carbon payment on these marginal lands. If we take some of these marginal lands and put them into a forage-based or a grass perennial-based management system, we should be able to build carbon. So is there a possibility we could also carbon farm some of these marginal acres? And so I want to show you a couple more slides. These are what I classed as the coarse textured soils. And I had a couple outliers there that I discovered we could consider those as receiving lower rates of nitrogen, because we know that if you kind of are on the lower end of the nitrogen application management scenario on your farm, that possibly you're also going to starve your soils for carbon, because you're mining more carbon out of the soil to get at that nitrogen, that organic form of nitrogen. Now, I'm not advocating over application of nitrogen. That's not what the issue is here. But the issue is it's all about nitrogen too. But anyway, I had to kind of highlight those 2 points. They fit the general trend though. They certainly do, but they're outside of that line that I fit the data to. But we can see here that, same effect, lower productivity rating soils, they are losing carbon. And by and large, the coarse textured soils as a whole are losing carbon. There's a couple points there above zero, but by and large, most are below zero. So that's definitely a marginal land, okay? Marginal, coarse textured, unprofitable soil types. These would be our wetland soils. And again, some of these wetland soils are very thick, black, could be very high producing soils, you know, with the right climate and the right scenario. And so, but we also see negativity here as well. And so those soil types with the lower productivity rating in the wetland soil category are also losing carbon. So again, the common theme here is carrying through that our marginally cropland soils are losing that carbon. And could it be that we could carbon farm those marginal lands? Here's the salt affected soils. We see a flip-flop, and that line is sloping the other way. And how I can explain that is where we have a lot of the salts on our landscape are with the soils that have the higher productivity rating in that saltier soil classification. So they're going to get the higher productivity rating because they've got the thicker topsoil, they've got more carbon in the profile, but they're more prone to those salt issues, and that's what's happening on our landscape. Is those soils are more affected by the salt. So it's the higher productivity soils that are being affected by our salts more negatively, and so we can see that they're not gaining as much carbon as the rest. So just to look at carbon there, go to the summary slide. Every Acre Counts really is trying to bring consensus among agricultural and conservation groups. I got both of my degrees at SDSU. I consider myself a production agronomist, a soil fertility-based soil specialist, and we focus on maximizing productivity efficiently. And so we, I can say I wasn't trained to think about wildlife and natural resources. And so I've come to appreciate that in the last 10, 15 years of my career. And so this program really is trying to bring together a consensus among all of these groups and show that we can work together and use our soil resource to its highest benefit. So marginal land set aside and not farmed, is the big story there. Environmental benefits could be very, very big, could be huge, soil health and water quality wise. Wild habitat increased and improved, definitely. We know that. Crop risk coverage increases, less reliance on taxpayer dollars for that subsidy, that crop insurance subsidy. That's a win. On-farm profitability improved through all that. Maybe some carbon payments. And then lastly, I want to highlight the stakeholder approval and acceptance. It's what they want us to do. And I think we can win while we're doing it. I know we can win while we're doing it. So basically that's the summary for today. I really appreciate Kristen coming along and adding her expertise. Couldn't do it without her. These are our current supporting partners. They're not on the slide in any importance to imply any importance. I want to first put that out there. It's just the way it looks. And so we have the Soil Health Coalition, South Dakota Corn. We are very happy to get AgTegra Cooperatives support for our program. They realize the importance of this in their trade area. Of course, Pheasants Forever, a huge partner with Purina, and then Ducks Unlimited, and of course, Game Fishing Parks. So, if you're a part of an organization today that thinks this is good, let's talk about how we can partner and benefit from this program. So with that, I'm done. I'll stop my share and turn it back over to Connie.
Thank you, Anthony and Kristen. We do have a question in the Q&A. We'll kind of take a couple of questions first. Instead of a carbon program, wouldn't it be simpler to just tie payments on marginal land to organic matter level and let that by the incentive to adapt better practices?
Sure. That's, unless I'm not understanding the question correctly, but I will address that carbon and organic matter are essentially the same thing. And so the world, the environmental world is focusing on the carbon. And I didn't want to make this an environmental climate discussion, but that's what's driving the carbon payment. And so they're focusing on a carbon credit, which is actually a ton of CO2. And CO2 is the gas in our atmosphere. It's considered a greenhouse gas. And so eventually we have good conversion numbers to convert organic matter in the soil to organic carbon. They're related very well. And I'm sorry, because of the time today, I didn't show that graph, but I have a lot of data that, and many others that do too, that relationship is really good. And so in essence, a carbon payment is an organic matter payment. And so I hope that answers the question.
Okay, we have another question for you. When you make an edge in your field, whether with precision or not, have you found a good way to keep the hired sprayers in the crop and out of the habitat?
Oh, that's a fun question. And Kristen, please, you could add in as well. I think how I would address that with precision ag, and one of our cooperators actually brought this up as a potential benefit program or something that we could add into every acre counts, is that this waterway issue. And I showed a picture of a waterway problem. And the reason that most of them waterways are gone is exactly what the person asked the question about, is those sprayers have taken them out. The Roundup days and overlap into those areas have taken them out. But this person that suggested this idea to us said, a lot of these sprayers now they're controlling each nozzle. And so with very high precision GPS, the RTK stuff, we should be able to put these waterways back in place and theoretically drive over them, and that sprayer should be able to shut off and protect that waterway. So that would be the way I would want to answer that question right now. I totally understand the significance of the question, but I hope that's a good enough answer.
We have time for one more live question before we kind of do the wrap up and then transition to our continuing conversation or informal discussion, if you will, which we invite everyone to continue that conversation with us. At the moment, I'm not seeing any other questions or comments. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen to kind of do the wrap up, and then we can go into our continued conversation. Well, thank you for joining us today. I want to thank Anthony and Kristen for their presentations. I'd like to draw your attention to the chat feature. There you'll find a link to any of the previous crop hour presentation recordings. So whether it happened back in January, February, or this week or yet to come, you will find those presentation recordings at the link included in the chat. Also in the chat, you will see a link to access or request printed South Dakota pest guides and other handouts that we have. Normally we'd haul them around to the different meetings, but since we're doing it virtual, the easiest way is for you to just request it, and then we'll get that mailed out to you. And I'd also like to say that there's a link for a feedback survey, which will go out tomorrow. We've had some issues with the email arriving, but there's an email coming from SDSU Extension. Generally, it goes on a Friday with a survey link. We encourage you to complete that survey at the conclusion of the week, or if you're only attending today, if you could fill that out, we'd much appreciate that. There's also a link to register for Soy 100 if you're interested in that. This is the link/QR code for the weekly crop hour. So this is not the CCA CEU credits. So again, that'd be the survey at the conclusion of the week. Real briefly, before I show the CCA CEU credit QR code, Matt, could you launch the poll? If you each could take a few seconds to fill out this 2-question poll, it's really beneficial for us as we develop our presentations and programs and kind of getting an idea of what worked, what didn't work, what you liked, what you would like to kind of see going forward. So really encourage you to do this quick poll. And then like usual, Matt, once the great majority have filled out the poll, go ahead and share those results. Or go ahead and close the poll. All right, thank you for filling out that survey. Just a momentary lag. Just a quick reminder, tomorrow we're continuing our research week discussion with a presentation by Dr. Jonathan Kleinjohn, who will do an update about South Dakota field crops, and then Dr. Emmanuel Bayam-Kama, who will share with us about the SDSU plant diagnostic clinic services that are provided and available. And then same with Dr. Brent Turnipseed, he will share what is going on and what's available for at the SDSU seed testing lab. Again, the link to register for Soy 100 is included in the chat. It'll be next Tuesday, March 16th. There's both an in-person event and virtual component. So encourage you to register if you have an interest in soybeans. There'll be some different panels and a lot of extension folks are working with that. And we have some invited speakers. So it's shaping up to be a good program. So encourage you to check that out. And then we have our water, weather, and climate week also happening next week. And then the long-awaited CEU credits for CCA applicators. So at this time, I encourage you to grab your mobile device, open up that app, and scan that QR code to receive your credits. And I'll leave that up for just for a minute or two here. This will be the only time that we'll be showing this QR code. So if you stuck with us this long, please don't miss this opportunity. And again, like I said, next week is the water, weather, and climate. So invite you to join us Tuesday through Friday, 10 a.m. Central for those presentations. And then following today's program, we are going to open it up for an informal discussion, continuing the conversation with Anthony and Kristen, and anything else that may need to be brought up or is brought up for attention. So encourage you to join us if at all possible. I'm going to attempt to do something here. I'm going to attempt to look at the QA. We have a question, Anthony and Kristen. Is the $150 per acre incentive a one-time payment or is it per year?
You want me to take that, Kristen? It is a one-time payment for the length of the contract. However, we are working with the Soil Health and Habitat Program first. That is the Pheasants Forever program, and they want to make that $150 payment right away the first year. So that will be effective for the length of the contract, the 5 years. So that's $150 for the 5 years. So the every acre counts part of the program, which will tap into dollars after SHHP or after soil health and habitat. That will be a $30 acre payment per year for 5 years. So the total $150. So just we wanted to make them the same, but we're working with a lot of entities here. SDSU, Pheasants is different. It's just the way it had to be, given administration and all those type of things that Kristen and I can't control. But essentially, they're the same, $150 for the length of the contract, which is 5 years. Kristen, you want to add something in there because I didn't explain it well? Go right ahead.
Yeah, I know that you did a good job there. Emmanuel asked a question in the chat and I responded. It just ended up being directly to him, but he asked about poor acres in the middle of the field due to gravel or sand. Typically on those acres, if it's going to make it more difficult to farm around, and you're going to be picking the planter up and causing more time out there than what's efficient, we don't do anything with those, but I just usually refer them on to like a farm bill biologist to look at any equip or CSP options that would work on those spots. So that's kind of what I answered to him. So Anthony, do you have anything to add on there for those spots?
I can see, Emmanuel, that because we're in a working lands program, there will be allowance for driving on those acres, where the CRP acres were very contained and didn't want traffic across those acres. But if we have a marginal land situation that the farmer wants to put in to grass, planting up to that, lifting up and driving over and setting down and planting along the other side is allowable. So maybe that will help out with that question. Thank you, Emmanuel.
Well, Matt, if you would like to transition folks over for the continued discussion. While Matt's doing that, we do have a question in the Q&A. The prevent plant payment is pretty good incentive to keep trying, although there is still expense with prevent plant unless you just want to make habitat.
Kristen?
Yeah, that's something that we're still playing around with. Things that I've looked at, it just depends upon if you're an enterprise unit or optional, because if you're enterprise and you don't qualify at that 20 acres and multiple sections, then you're still not going to get paid on that. So there's a lot of working variables with that. So it's hard to really put a number to it. So that's kind of why it's an ongoing question and study. And I think it would actually probably be more field by field basis of what you've come across and looking at the history with it. It's also trying to keep that, prevent plant option there by getting it planted and harvested consecutively to get it back in eligibility. So yeah, that's a great question. Just not 100% answerable at the time. I think it's just, like I said, field by field basis, really digging in and looking at the patterns and what's been done in the past and what enterprise or optional unit you have set up on your policy. So.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that as well that we have shown and we know that removing these small areas or parts of fields out, increases the yield for the rest of the field, and so that will increase insurance coverage on the rest of the field. So when you have a loss, you have a higher level of insurance. So that benefit should not be overlooked. That's what I'm trying to point out. And then I've ran across a few cases where the PP option has ran out, and Kristen just talked about that. We're beyond the 3 years, and here we still have this land that has an issue, and so the PP thing is gone. And so there are other examples, and where taking land out of production has multiple benefits.
Well, thank you.